Let's talk about all this with former Met Police Detective Peter Bleksley. Good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning, Julia.
I bet you're spitting tacks about this.
Well, it's very interesting when you say about being London-centric on this story, because I've met a number of these just stop oil idiots, none of whom come from London. And, of course, it makes me ask them the question, well, why don't you go to your hometown or your home village and create such disruption there and see how you get on?
Well, no, I'd like them to go to China and do it, then see how they get on, because they seem to be very, very, very concerned about whether we've got, or whether we're insulated, whether we're doing any more drilling in the either shale gas or whatever at all, or in the oil sea, in the North Sea for North Sea oil and gas. But they seem remarkably unbothered by coal-fired power stations in China. Who knew?
Yes, who knew? But there again, you see, when you have the sense of entitlement that these people have, that they can disrupt every working men and women's lives, people trying to get to hospital, all manner of things that people want to do as part of their daily business. When you have that sense of entitlement, that you can utterly disrupt that with probably very few consequences, then this, I'm afraid, is what we've got. And now they've got a new tactic, and the police are going to have to come to grips with this in some way, shape or form. Meanwhile, until they do, we're all going to be disrupted.
Well, exactly. And we understand that Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister's calling in police chiefs and saying, basically, banging heads together, you need to get on and deal with this. We've seen, over 500 arrests when we had the month of action in, I've lost track. Was it October? Yeah, it was October. Then it was supposed to end for a couple of days, and then it seemed to start all over again. But we've had people who were sort of bragging about the fact they've been arrested a dozen times. How come if you've been arrested a dozen times, what are you doing on the streets still able to carry out these protests? Look, I believe in the right to protest, believing it's part of freedom of speech and things. But what these protests are doing, not in this case, that walking slowly, is often illegal protests, damaging buildings, throwing paint over private property, damaging works of art, which I think is just beyond appalling, and some of these protests, like sitting down in the road. If you or I sat down in the road, we'd be moved on and arrested. Why are they able to act with what appears to be impunity?
Well, the police were slow to react in the first stages, and they got themselves in a bit of a tangle over the definition of what constitutes significant disruption. I would have gone straight to the courts and argued that disruption that was occurring day after day after day is significant in itself. Because language is interpreted by the law and it needs to be challenged.
But isn't that one of the problems? And we've had this, and there were lots of people prosecuted under long-standing existing law, and then, of course, we've had new laws in terms of protests, some of which I very much disagree with in terms of nuisances. But we shouldn't have something that is so open to interpretation, should we, as the word significant?
Yeah, and you see, it's part of the police's job to challenge this through their lawyers, to say to their lawyers, well, this is how we're going to interpret the word significant because it's happening on a daily basis. And if the High Court wants to challenge us over that or criticise us over that, so be it. We're putting the needs of the working people first.
And that is where it comes down to, isn't it? Because a lot of the time, I remember I was doing Question Time the other month, and I was thinking, these are largely middle-class people. They're all called, Jacinta and Quentin, for goodness sake. And anyway, why do they not have a job they have to go to in the mornings? And the argument is always, but what they're doing is more important than someone getting to work. As we saw that awful case of a man who missed his own father's funeral, for goodness sake. People getting children to hospital and the like. But what they're doing, they say, is saving the human race. And a completely false claim, by the way. Take that off, it is a false claim. Feel free to put the complaints in. I can prove that. But it's just quite bizarre that that argument is allowed. And we often see judges being quite sympathetic, and even police officers being quite sympathetic, because these are nice middle-class people protesting. So they're treated very differently from other people who might carry out the same criminal, in these cases, acts. But what I worry about is when we are into sort of religious cult-type claims, like, we're saving the world, so everything we do is justified, what are they going to do next? That's the worry, because what are they going to justify next?
Yeah, exactly. And when are they going to become zealots that will do absolutely anything to try and maintain getting their word across? As I say, I've met some of them. On the surface, they seem fairly bright and articulate young people.
Do they? Not the ones I've seen.
Well, the sense of entitlement that they have is absolutely staggering and hugely irritating. But on that note, I noticed that they ridiculed the police because they stood around watching them drinking in a pub.
Yeah.
I am very happy to volunteer to drink in a pub watching these people so that the police can get about doing some proper policing. And believe you me, my treatment of them will be robust.
You're a hero. You're a hero for all of us. Thank you, as always. So good to talk to you.